get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Aaron Levenstadt of Join. You can find them at joinagencyalliance.com, their agency alliance. We'll talk a little bit about that. Aaron, also, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out. This is part of the Top Agency series. So we had Jason Swank on. He talked about building up his agency to 8 figures and selling it. That was really interesting. And then Todd Taskey, actually, Aaron was on Todd's podcast as well. He's got the Second Bite podcast. So Todd helps pair agency owners with private equity, and sometimes they make more on the second bite than they do on the first. Aaron actually has firsthand experience with this twice, actually. So we'll talk about that. Another good one was Kevin Hurrigan, who had an agency since 1995. So he kind of talks about the landscape of the internet, business, and agency world during those times as well. You can check out more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and then the full back-end execution. So, Aaron, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the company and the host so they can create amazing relationships, create amazing content, but most importantly, run their business. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. And I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I have found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So when I saw Aaron on Todd's show and Jason's show, I'm like, we got to get him on and share his knowledge. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. I'm excited to introduce Aaron Levenstadt. He grew up, actually, you put in quotes, Aaron, professionally speaking at Google, working on search core products like organic and paid. He actually founded and scaled and sold digital agencies. Now he actually brings best-in-class scale experts and others that have scaled and put them in rooms with current owners and leaders, like I was saying with joinagencyalliance.com. He also does some investing in the markets and digital agencies as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Aaron, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
So there's so many places to start. We won't start back in how you got into the digital agency world, but we'll circle back to some of those old businesses. But you hit on something that I thought would be important to start with, which is sales and marketing strategy and big mistakes people make with sales. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think agency sales specifically, and I went through this, I lived this journey over many years, and now I'm fortunate that we're able to support people in our community at Joint Agency Alliance with helping them through this stuff. And so a couple like big mistakes. Maybe the biggest mistake that we see is the order of information that is presented in the sale. And one of the biggest mistakes there is, agencies, I think, have this inclination that they should be like, leading with logos, or the first thing that you say when you meet a client is like what you do and how you do it. And, call that like features and benefits of your offering. And that is categorically wrong. It is the wrong way to approach the conversation. We can get into the nitty gritty on this, but the highest level, like the prospect in this kind of sale has to buy into, why, like, first of all, that they have a problem and why they should care. Second, that like if they don't solve it, it's really bad. Like Game of Thrones, like winter is coming, and why you are a reasonable or the right provider to help them solve their problem. And until you've gotten through those pieces of the puzzle, you really cannot be even talking about the specifics of your offer or why, like the nitty gritty of what you do or why you're great or the logos or that you've worked with Boeing and Starbucks, and it doesn't, even if those were your clients, it doesn't matter until you've gotten those things in their head in kind of that order. Because I've gotten really fascinated with psychology, and this is all rooted in like psychology of like getting through like the two levels of the human brain, the old like reptilian brain, and then like the more modern cortex. I get like super sciencey here for a second, but the idea is like you've got to build that comfort and through the reptilian brain and then into the cortex. And the way that you build that comfort today is not, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of rapport you can do, but it's really about getting through these three things that help relax the mind before you can talk about your offer.
So what are the three things again?
So you have to, I mean, the prospect, before you can talk about anything that you do, the prospect, it has to be clear that there is going to be a big problem if the prospect does not solve what you solve, like a serious problem. So like I kind of call like winter is coming. Like, there's a big winter coming. A good example of this would be like, and I heard this talked about, this isn't agency, but just to contextualize this with a very tangible example. Like if you were in the movie theater industry, like back in the day, and you had a movie theater that had like flat seating, and you had like, in your neighborhood, like 7 or 8 movie theaters coming into town that were all stadium style seating, the new theater versions. Unless you figure out how to do that, you're gone. Like it's over. Like, because the stadium is such a better experience that there's no way so, a consultant in that space might, lead off by saying, listen, we know the space, we're in real estate, or we do real estate consulting for a real estate agency providing services for the moving industry. And we know that, in this neighborhood in Poughkeepsie or Chicago or New York, there are 6 movie theaters coming into town in the next 6 months that have stadium style seating. And it's not like a little bit of a better experience. It's like, there's no reason for them to come to this theater anymore. And there's a change happening, right? And there's a change in this space. And unless you figure out, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, how to get in line with this change and to get, and to work with, whether it's us or somebody else who understands and can navigate this for you, you're going to have a colossal problem. And that has to get put on the table. That's one. The second is why they should care. So, I mean, the movie theater, that's, I guess, an easier example. Obviously, like their existence is at stake, or that's, the way that we're talking about this here. And then whatever you're doing as a firm, like in my world, we did, search engine marketing as a core offering, and, they should care because, same idea is like, if they're not found in that search when somebody's looking for them, there's a 0% chance they're getting that business. I mean, right? And worst case scenario where we'd see like people that were buying ads, but they weren't coming up organically. And then you're buying ads, but you're actually kind of directing that traffic to a competitor who comes up in organic search. And that's even worse than not coming up. So it's this is why you should care, right? So that's another one. And then the other thing that you need to figure out and you need to establish is why you, and why you, I should say, because I think this gets, when we talk about this with members in the community, and it gets misconstrued in that why you is not about your capabilities. That comes up elsewhere in the pitch. Why you is about why, if this doesn't work out as between you and the prospect, after they sign the contract and send you the money, if it doesn't work out, it is bad for both of you, like really bad. Like you have serious skin in the game, and you beyond the check, and you have to figure out a way to get that on the table and communicate that like well before it's asked, if it's even asked at all. Like sometimes this will never even come up organically, but you should still be putting it on the table as to why it's bad if this doesn't work out. And there's different ways of saying that or having, talking tracks around that. But the idea that, if this doesn't work out for both parties, it's bad for everybody. And that's really, that's how you kind of help a prospect, get a bit more comfortable with that. And that's, until all that's done, you can't get into what you do or why you're great at whatever it is you do, because that has to be established first. And that is rooted in human psychology.
Aaron, do you remember a time where you just made this mistake and it just fell flat? And then
Well,
afterwards you look back and go, oh my God, I totally botched that.
many times. Like I am not like I've gotten very good at this. I am not a natural. I mean, I don't whatever natural born salesperson. I don't see myself that way. Um, like I whatever. It's a funny story that I sometimes share is like I did my undergrad at Stanford, and I was a lot friends with a lot of guys on like on the sports teams at Stanford. Like they were whatever football and basketball and whatever, and they were all their apparel was sponsored Nike, and then they had the name of the sport. And then there was like a small subset of our friend group, which is kind of the subset I was a part of, where we had the same apparel printed, but it was like swoosh study. So like my background was not in like I was, that I was good at school. I was good. I had to learn this and I studied it and then practiced it. And I was devout about it. And by that I mean like maybe I mean somebody say like maybe a little like OCD about it, but I would literally record myself on these calls, and this is like before Zoom and Otter and these other Fathoms, and with that it's even easier. But I would have a recording device, phone or whatever. I would listen to myself, and Jeremy, to your point, I would then like go for walks and I would just replay the calls, and I would listen. Where did it go wrong? Where did it fall flat? Where am I not? Where? But I mean, did it fall flat? I mean, yeah, like a lot of times. Like this is to get good at this stuff. I mean, I believe you need really good role models that know how to do it. People that have surround yourself, people that have done it, so you can get into their brains and access that. Because you can't. I mean, this isn't something you can really Google. You can read about it a little bit, but yeah, it's like reading about Michael Jordan playing basketball. You're not shooting like Jordan the next day, right? So it's you got to surround yourself with people that have done it, and you've got to really be you got to get reps in, right? So I got a lot of reps in, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way to get to the point where I have finessed this to where like what I do and what I see work in practice jives with the science, and it works. But yeah, I mean, I'll try to give a more tangible example, but I would remember pitches where and we were pitching at one point like a large like pest control, like national pest control company, right? Whatever, there's probably only two or three of them. And we got into the thing. And I think, again, like my natural, and I think I was asked, like the prospect was like, oh, like, tell me what you guys do. Like, I want to hear about what it is. So before I even had the chance to go into the structure, the whys and the why you should care, I just started talking about the offering. And that's a mistake. Even when the prospect says, tell me, but like the first thing I want to know is what you guys do and how much you charge for it, right? And one might react instinctively to be like, I should just answer that because they're asking. That's wrong. And that pitch was, we were finalists. And that pitch was, we did not win that pitch. And I'm 97.3% certain it's because of the way that I handled the presentation of that information, literally the ordering of the information, because you have to get in their head. And, it's a hard thing to wrap around because the gulf of information between, or the gulf of how much you understand what you do as between you and the prospect is so large. You forget because you don't live anywhere but your own head. But the gulf between your understanding of what you do and how you do it and your model and your pricing structure, and it is the gulf is Grand Canyon-esque between your understanding of it and the prospect. And I forget the movie now, but there's a movie, I think it's with Denzel Washington. At one point in the movie, he's like listening to somebody pitch him and he like stops and he's like, tell it to me like I'm a fifth grader. And your prospect may not say that to you, but this structure helps you do that. And that's what I would strive to do.
Aaron, talk about, I love that example. How do you redirect that conversation? Because you don't want to dismiss, hey, Aaron, tell me about your company and what you do and the pricing. How do you redirect it at that point so that, okay, I know I need to get into the problem and everything else?
So you mean like when you're asked by the prospect?
Yeah,
Right?
you're asked, because I see that happening all the time.
Yeah.
Like, for sure. Like, hey, tell me what you do. How's the pricing work? It's just a natural, conversation for sure.
Yeah. I think the thing to do is say, listen, Hey, Tom, Jeremy, I appreciate you asking that question. We're going to get to all that, but there's a few things that we got to take care of before we get to that. And we're going to get your questions answered today. We got, 33 minutes on the clock left today, and I'm glad we're all able to get here and make this time on each other's calendars. But I do need to make sure that we talk about some key things that we get on the table, and then I'll get into the nitty gritty with you. And that is, I think, a completely reasonable thing to do. Is you're there to pitch. And I think part of this is the frame of reference around this construct. It's both of your time, it's their time and your time. And your time is very valuable, as is their time. And there's a mutual respect that should be established. And you have a way that you want to run the conversation because it's in the best interest of everybody, including the prospect, to get the information this way. So I would redirect in something like that. Like, hey, listen, we're going to get to all this. Don't worry. Like we got 33 minutes. We're going to get to all your questions, but I want to start here. Let me start at this point. And then we'd have a few other things that we do, throughout the course where if you get a question, you have to be ready to redirect it. And there is going to be a time where they can ask questions, but they're going to allow for that. You almost want to think about it like a little bit like a landing page, in the sense that there's a structure to the landing page, right? It opens up with this, then you have testimonials, then you have something else, then you have media mentions. Yeah. It's a structured presentation of information. And the way that you should think about the pitch is not dissimilar, in the sense that there's a structure to how it goes. And a part of that is going to be a sandbox where you get to a point where you're going to open up the sandbox, and the prospect can ask, they're going to have time to ask any questions they want. But it's only after they see the first 3 sections or 6 sections of the landing page before that opens up.
Yeah, no, I like the thought process of thinking of it as a landing page. I know, I love some of the direct response copywriters I have on, like the headline gets them the subhead gets them the first sentence, and so on. Sometimes people will, just scroll to the bottom and try and look at what the pricing is. But on a landing page, usually it's a learn more type of situation. But no, I like that, thinking of it as that structure, because it is a conversation that's kind of going through the points that that trying to answer the questions that they're going to have before they ask them. You talked about role models. I'd love to, I don't know if we break up into 2 parts, if there's a reason to, but like, I think of what you talked about as kind of resources, which are external resources. And I know you've read a lot of different things as far as like psychology, et cetera. So if you have specific resources you recommend people check out that you like, and then we could talk about role models, and maybe role models bleeds into, obviously mentors, or just role models that are distant role models through their courses, et cetera. So I'll let you kind of take that, if there's resources you recommend, and then we can talk about role models, and they may blend together.
So I think a couple of things on role models. So I think, I'll go specific on agency, and then we'll kind of maybe pan out a little. So I think as leaders of agencies are building their firms and growing their firms, scaling their firms, maybe eventually wanting to head towards an exit, having role models and people around you that have done this journey before, that have scaled and sold for, life-changing, multi-generational wealth outcomes. You need to surround yourself with these people. You need to be in rooms with them. I think that is mission critical. There's a couple stories I'll share around this. One is personal, and then I'll pan out. So as I was going through my journey, as we're kind of in the middle of our scale stage, this was a few years before our second exit, is I sat down with this prominent business guy, and I had the good fortune to get on his calendar through a mutual introduction, and we sit down, and he basically asked me to send him the numbers before the meeting. So I send him the numbers, our business numbers, our P&L or whatever, before the meeting. And we sit down, and he says, "Hey, I had the chance to take a look at everything that you sent over. You've got a really good business, Aaron." I'm like, "Well, thanks." He's like, who's, as you're thinking through scale and sale, like, who's on your advisory board? And I was kind of like, well, I have friends that I bounce this stuff around, and I got, people in business that I know, and I'm in like YPO and EO, which are like a mix of all different business owners, and there's an e-commerce person and a SaaS guy on those things. And, I get different perspectives, and he's like, no, like, that's not what I mean. Like, okay, well, what do you mean? And he's like, who do you have around you that has done the exact thing that you want to do? Because, this turn of phrase has really stuck with me. He says, you can't ask somebody for directions to a place that they've never been. Like, they've never been on that road. So like, it's cool to be in that YPO thing, but like, and nothing wrong with YPO, but like, it's fine. But like the people that are in that group, if they haven't gone down the road you're going to go down, if they haven't run that marathon, their advice might be helpful, but it also like might not be the advice that is going to be super helpful for you. And I'll give a very specific example on that. So when I first joined YPO, there was a guy in my group who I clicked with, really, really good guy. He was in the e-commerce business, and I was talking about our firm and how to go about expanding it and different growth channels. And he's like, the best growth channel that's worked for us, the absolute best thing we did in our business, Aaron, was we started layering in new offerings. So, this is in the YPO group, and the colleague on the YPO table says, you should really be doing that. Like, look at your offerings and start building in new offerings. It's a terrible mistake in the agency world. It probably works in e-com to a certain degree because like you have manufacturing already set up and you can cut a new product and throw something on the website. The cost of doing that is relatively low. But adding new lines of business and service in an agency is effectively adding a new business to the agency. So I don't think his advice, I think it was very well intentioned. I just think it was not applicable. And somebody who has been through the agency scale and exit trajectory, that's who you need to talk to. And the person that I sat down with, the prominent business person, that's who you need to surround yourself with. And he was saying, you need to have those role models around you. And that's a big part of what we're doing at Joint Agency Alliance. A big part of it is surrounding agency owners with people that have done it to get access to their brains and to kind of live in their shoes and embody their experience. So that's the specific to the agency and panning out. So as I was going down my exit trajectory, and since I've exited, I've spent a lot of time reading about investing and investors, and I'm just kind of really interested in this topic and really like reading about it for whatever reason. So there's this investor, this guy, his name is Guy Spear, and within investing circles, he's pretty well known. He's kind of mentioned in the same breath as Warren Buffett, same kind of value style investor. And Guy Spear, I actually think he's written one or two books. And in one of his books, he talks about this, the importance of role models. And he has two stories on it. One is he still does this, I think, to this day, where he uses Buffett as his role model. And what Guy Spear will do is he will literally I don't think he has access to Buffett. Like, he's not I can't call him to get advice. I can't join a group that he's in. But what he will do is he will literally dress like him. He will sit down at a desk with a Buffett chair because he's seen the chair the guy has. He puts down a Coke and a hamburger like Buffett would. And he literally tries to embody him. He'll speak like him. He'll write like him. He is embodying his role model, right? So Spear, his role model is Warren Buffett. And he's literally drinking the drinks that he drinks, eating the food that he eats, and is trying to get into his essence when he's in his investment selection process. And this is so human because it is at the root of humanity, right? I have a 4-year-old, and my 4-year-old, he mimics half the 3/4 of the things that I say, for better or for worse, right? So this is just human. The young hunters would have to learn from the elders how to do it, right? That's the core of human growth and civilization. So it's very human, and having those role models is really, really important. And Spears, he talks about another experience where he joined a group where he had people that were, further ahead of him on this investment track. And one of the guys that was in the group was a guy named Bill Ackman, who's also a very well-known investor. So Spear joins this group. Bill Ackman's in the group. as like kind of more, whatever, like more of the, like I've kind of done it already person in the group or people in the group, the role models in the group. And he basically, what Spear says is he tells a story about how he is talking to somebody else in the room about one of his investment ideas. And it was something like a version of like Fannie or Freddie Mac that focuses on farming, but whatever, the specifics are not super important here. But he mentions this investment idea and he's like basically saying, I'm going to go back to the office next week and I'm going to be purchasing a large chunk of this company. The guy that he tells this to, retells this to Bill Ackman, who's literally in the same room. And then before the meeting lets out, Bill Ackman comes back to Guy Spear and he says, hey, Guy, before you make that investment next week, call me. So Guy calls him. And Ackman says, funny enough, I've been researching this same business and I'm going to take a significant short position. Right. So I'm going to bet against the company, right? The same company that Guy Spear was going to bet on. And whatever, Guy's like, well, can you why? Like, can you explain this? So Ackman explains it, and basically the details don't have to get into the whole thing. It's in the book, but it basically like Ackman uncovered that it was like quasi fraud and whatever, not really marketing what they were actually doing. And had Spear not been in that room and gotten that advice from the role model from Ackman, he talks about in the book, his investment career like would have been maybe over at that point in time. Like it never would have materialized because he was going to bet, something close to the farm on this. And it was only by being in that room with the right people that had done this before, that had a different vantage point, that could see things differently, stand on the shoulder of that giant, Ackman in this case, that he was able to course correct and not go down this path that would have ended in near or if not utter demise. So it's I think role models are helpful from both of these vantage points in the sense that you model their good behavior and you can learn a lot from things they're doing really well. And then also you can learn, even more arguably from, the mistakes that they help you avoid because they've done this before. So in our community, we had somebody share they were going down their scale trajectory and they had unveiled a few different lines of service, tried to come up with a SaaS offering to complement their agency offering. And make a long story short, it was like a $11 million mistake. They spent $11 million on this before they finally had somebody be like, this is not the right course and you're not making progress, and whatever the advice that they got. But, unless you have that course correction as you're navigating the depth of the mid-Atlantic, like it's easy to make these large mistakes that you need mirrors around you to help you avoid. So that's it's my initial thinking.
I love
on role
that.
models. I can talk more on this.
I do want to talk
yeah.
about your role models in the agency space. And there is a video version. If you are listening to the audio, we are on Joint Agency Alliance. So I'd love to hear your role models in the agency space. Maybe some of them are on this page. Actually, I had Wes Matthews on the podcast. That was a great episode. But before you answer that, I do want to, I brought up the Guy Spear website. And so people could check out, you could see The Education of a Value Investor is one of the books you're probably referring to here. And he's got actually a list of other of his favorite books on here, self-help psychology, additional books. He's got Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within, the Intelligent Investor. And so there's a bunch of these other ones and a whole other page of Delivering Happiness, Berkshire Beyond Buffett, and all these other ones. So you could check out that on guyspear.com to learn more. And there's a treasure trove of books here that you could check out. But you're a role model. So thanks for sharing that, Aaron. Super valuable. Your role models.
Yeah. So within the role models that we have in the group, everybody that we bring in are people that are, vetted in the sense that we understand their scale trajectories. We understand, the degree of success that they had in building their businesses. They've scaled incredibly successfully, have had one or more exits. The exits have been material, i.e. like life-changing or multi-generational wealth. They've done it. These are people that have, and this is by the way, just a few of them. There's a bunch more. You just can't put it all up on the screen. And these are people that have they have run the marathon, they've gone up the mountain, they've gone on that Oregon Trail from the East Coast to California, have made lots of mistakes that they openly share, and they do it because they want to give back and they want to help other people. Scaling this kind of business, excuse me, I'm just going to grab a water. Scaling this kind of business is really hard. It is really hard to do. And these people that have done it, that are involved with our group, they are, amazing people in that they genuinely want to share and help others that are going through it. Because to get through the Oregon Trail, you need food, and you need friends, right? You need, we talk about what those mean in a little bit more detail, but these are the kind of friends that you want to have around you. They've done the trail. They know how to get to the glories of California. So that's who these people are.
On your journey, what was some of the good or maybe not good advice that you got that helped? You mentioned one with the e-commerce founder, but what about from, your agency role models? What are some of the good lessons or advice you learned?
So I'm obviously I've had advice that, like I mentioned with that gentleman I sat down with, he was like, you got to wrap these people around you and figure out ways to get in the room with them. So that's one. Another one I would say is on a sales point. So again, as I was kind of figuring out sales and then training a sales team, and I think this is overlooked in the agency world, but the importance of being compelling, and how does one be compelling when they are engaging a client for the first time through whatever pitch process is there, and then thereafter, once they're working with your team, how do you consistently be compelling? Because I think a big part of the world is, yes, results matter, and I'm not dismissing the importance of like hitting client KPIs and metrics and whatever other things that matter, but this is a human business, and part of what attracts people to one another are people that are compelling. And you personally, as a leader of an agency, have to be compelling, and your team has to be compelling. And what that means, I'm happy to like chat on if that would be helpful. But I think that was some really helpful advice. I had never heard that before, but it is super important and was very impactful. It was like, I again like kind of dove into like, okay, well, what does that mean? What's the science around compellingness? How does one be compelling? So that's
As far as what did you do after you got the advice from the advisory board? How did you think about the types of people you were going to try and attract on an advisory board?
Yeah. So you mean putting the thing together, the advice? So I think it was mainly around, well, like people that I, through conversations liked. So that was one. And then two, this is a lengthy, arduous process. It was also people that were that could clearly articulate like how they went through their scale trajectory and then the outcome around it. That was important. And I think that one is, that was a big one as well, is, understanding their arc. And there isn't one arc, right? It's not like there is a right path. There are actually a number of wrong things that you can do, but within the ambit of like scaling right, there isn't a single path. So I think the other part of it was understanding how people that I surrounded myself with through, this lengthy, like, I don't know, it took me like 3 or 4 years to figure out how to put this together. But then once I had it, the idea of I can resonate with this scale arc, even if it's not the arc I'm going to follow precisely, I resonate with it. I get it. And I could, this person has gone down that Oregon Trail that I'm going to need to embark. They've done it, and I can understand how having their eyes and ears is going to be super helpful as I'm going down, my trajectory.
What was the structure that you had? I'm curious, was it when you talk to them, hey, we're going to do a once a month meeting, or all of us get together, it's once a quarter, you do individual meetings. I don't know if you end up offering them compensation or how you do that. What were some of the things you did around that?
Yeah, so there was some structure. So there was we basically I would have like one-on-ones with different board members, with people on around me in the advisory board. Some of it was like we'd have a standing, other times it was more informal and ad hoc. I just want to like, hey, like this thing happened. Can we jump in for like 22 minutes and chat it through? So it was a combination of like formal structured chats and then more informal, like just tap to can we get on for a few minutes to talk about something. And then it was also, depending on the situation, we would have at times like multiple members in a room where I'm like, hey, like, I'd love to get a couple different perspectives on this. And that was sort of the way that it was structured in that capacity. And again, I think the other thing too is, we haven't gotten into this yet, but one of the really important pieces of advice that came out as my journey was, I talked about the compellingness, but through that structure and through those structured discourses was also the importance of like niching and katanifying our offering. So I use like that idea of being like a super specialist, and how we evolved as an organization once that advice was trumpeted and I heard it multiple different times from people that I really trusted. But we kind of morphed over time from an agency that did a number of different things to an agency that just did, well, the way that we would talk about it was we just did this one thing, which is helping your business get discovered as productively as possible on search. And that was the thing. And when it got into other points where we would get asked, like, okay, well, we're also thinking about doing some social, and we're also thinking about doing some TikTok, and this is hard, but you actually say no. So you say like, hey, listen, like, I appreciate that you want to, we would say things like this, where like, hey, like, well, we know the search thing you guys are doing, and we also want to layer in TikTok videos, TikTok ads, or whatever it might be. And the answer to that is, we would say like, listen, we're not going to take your money for that. In the same way that if you asked me to enter a ping pong tournament on your behalf, I would not do that either for money, because or probably even for free, because it would be awful to watch, or for anybody to have to endure that experience to see me play ping pong. It's not what I do well. And I think this is also something that the advice that came out of this really helped me understand was, when you're speaking with clients, potential clients and current clients, reminding them that, and arguably this is like counterintuitive, like there are many things that I am not good at. I am not good at ping pong. I'm not good at shooting pool. If you ask me to do those things, I'm not good at like TikTok video things. If you ask me to do those things, I'm not going to do right by you, right? But this thing, the search part of it, that I'm going to knock out of the park, and my team is going to knock out of the park for you. And when you create that degree of distinction, so another thing that comes up a lot in our agency alliance meetings is like, well, how do we create this differentiation? Well, that's the way what I just did, right? It was this idea of we are. And not only are we like, oh, yeah, we do search, but we'll also kind of do this and that. But search is our main thing. But yeah, we can help you with social. We don't know. No, you literally, you do not do that, and you do not take money for it. So that was I think a big unlock, and that kind of got woven into our entire agency infrastructure, from staffing to hiring to tools to what we say in conversations with clients.
I love the super specialist. Obviously, these people, if someone's out there like, you know what, Aaron, I love this. I definitely need a board of advisors. These people are successful. They're busy. How do you attract them? Again, like even paying them, they probably don't need the money anyways, right? How are some ways people should think about compensating in whatever way you think for these people?
Compensation is a part of it. So I think you have to think about that, and whether it's cash or equity or a combination. And I also think a big part of it is that is real. And I think that has to be thought about. The other thing that I think too is, like anything in life, is these are these are people that you are in the process of building relationships with and meaningful relationships with. And those relationships require investments, right, on both parties, right? So I would always be thinking about, even like with my people that were my advisors as I went through my journey, you know, and then people that are advisors in agency alliance, is I'm always thinking about like, hey, like what's going on in their world and how can I be helpful to them? Right. So like example, like I got off of a call with one of our advisors from Agency Alliance yesterday, and I happen to know of a person in the investment world that is what this guy is doing is exactly in line with what this investment person I know can help him with. So immediately I put them on an email and I'm like, I'm here, whatever you guys need, I'm here to be helpful. So this idea of like, yes, they're there to help you, but you are also investing in the relationship. And that I think is in
How do you help
conjunction
them
with,
as well?
yeah, exactly. It's a relationship. It's a human relationship, right? So I think that that's a big part of it. And yeah, and then yeah, the other parts of it too. But that's yeah, that's not a small piece of it. Is just consistently thinking about how you can be helpful in return.
No, I love that mantra. I try and live by that mantra. So thanks for bringing that up. There's two pieces, right? I want to talk about you've sold a couple companies, but you also invest in a couple companies. So I do want to start off with maybe some of the lessons you learned with selling. Maybe someone out there who's going to be selling in the future should, think about. And yeah.
No. So I think on the selling side of it, I mean, I'll share a couple of things that will try to be a couple of things that are tangible. I think one of the things that I learned through the course of sales processes, well, I'll share two things on this. One is the importance of having a conversation at the outset that I think is perhaps surprising to people that haven't done it and would be a bit you might be a little like quizzical on would this make sense. So this is advice I got as I started down this exit trajectory, and it goes like this. So when you're in conversations with an acquirer and you get into the conversations and you start getting into meatier conversations, you're beyond the introduction meeting, you're getting into management meetings, which are a little deeper, but a little bit before the letter of intent, and you're getting into it with them. I would highly recommend doing something like this, where you are in a room with them and there's a frame around this conversation where it's like the acquirer who's like asking you these questions and is inquiring about the business and almost kind of like expects you to be like really selling your business because they have the capital, they have whatever, they're bringing things to the table. And so you like the kind of construct is like, well, you're selling the firm to them. And I think that's an easy thing to fall into when you're in the position of the agency owner or leader that is having that conversation and you feel like you need to sell the firm to them. And the advice that I got was do the exact opposite. So once you get into the meetings and you're getting into the meetings, and what I said was, hey guys, like you guys seem like great folks and I want to make sure that we're on the same page moving forward through all this. I'm going to give you, I forget what it was, 7 or like the Letterman top 10. Well, I forget the exact number now, but I'm going to give you like the Letterman top 10 of why you should not buy this business. And I actually sat there and I could almost saw like, I mean, they kind of closed their mouths at one point, but their jaw open. It was like, you're going to tell me all the reasons why. I'm going to tell you all the reasons why if I'm in your shoes and I'm a buyer thinking about buying my business, here are all the reasons why I would not do this deal. Now, I'm happy to go into some of the
Yeah, go ahead.
like,
so maybe one or two just to give people a sense of how you thought about it.
Yeah. So things like, we had a few clients at the time that, their contracts would come up towards, I forget what it was, like November or something. And they would always cancel their contracts because they had to wait for their budgets to renew. And their budget cycles were like, they were like re-renewed in February or something. So there was this point where we'd have like, I forget the exact number, but let's just say it's like a 15% revenue drop off like in November. And we had that for the last like 3 years, something like this. And I flagged that. I'm like, you guys are going to see this in the numbers and you're going to be like, why is there a huge 15% drop in November? And you're going to wonder, like, what is going on? And I want to explain this to you now so you understand, like, part of this is a cyclical thing where contracts have to renew, and some of our contracts aren't on auto renew. And I'm flagging this for you right now. And I can go through a couple more, but just to continue this through is the benefits of having this conversation at this stage for any listener that's thinking about going through this or will go through this. I mean, like, it feels really weird that, you would do that, but get over that. Because when you do this, it is super helpful, and I would almost say powerful, for two reasons. One is you're building a ton of trust. Like, you're basically saying, like, hey, if I'm sitting in your guys' shoes, here's the skeletons in the closet. I'm opening the closet now before we get into any kind of due diligence. And I'm showing you every garment, right? The stuff that you would never want to wear. And I'm showing it to you now, right? That's one reason. So from a trust building perspective. The other reason is, just to infuse this example of the point that I just mentioned, is, 8 or 9 months later, when we actually got into due diligence and now there's lawyers involved and teams of people that weren't involved in that initial conversation, somebody flagged this exact thing, that, well, there's a huge drop and now there's an email thread, and my lawyer is like, oh, there's somebody's really concerned because they're seeing this drop in November. Nobody understands. I just wrote back. I'm like, hey guys, like, it CC'd the people that I had the initial conversation with. Guys, we talked about this in that meeting. This was reason number 6. End of email. And then it came back, was like, oh shoot, like, yeah, you're right. Move on. There's too much else to talk about. So you've already dealt with it before it comes up. And you almost make them, like, when it does come up, they're like a little, like, sheepish and like, oh yeah, you did talk about that. And why are we spending cycles on it now again? You've already flagged this. So, and a couple others were like things like, listen, this is not a pure SaaS embedded business, in the sense that, yes, we do have retainers, and we have, retainers that in most cases auto renew, but we're not baked into the back end data infrastructure of the company, and things can happen that are outside of our control. And I share this one example of a client that we were working with that decided to sponsor the Olympics that year. Whatever, forget which one, but like a winter or summer Olympiad. And they were like, yeah, like, okay, well, this is going to take a lot of budget. We're going to have to pause the program until we renew budgets next year, because sponsoring the Olympics is a big budgetary undertaking. So that is completely absent of any consideration about how we were doing as a service provider. So no matter how great you are, there are going to be things like that come up. And I let them know that. And so those were some of the things that came up in that, top 10 Letterman style.
Aaron, I love that. I know we only have another minute or two, so I just wanted to I want to point people to joinagencyalliance.com to learn more, and just take a minute or two and just talk about Agency Alliance and how it works.
Sure. So what Agency Alliance does at its core is it activates the 3 essential elements of scale that I learned through my journeys. So it does 3 things. One is it activates a peer network of similarly situated owners and leaders. The second thing that it does is it activates the advisory network of people that have done this exact thing that leaders of agencies are going to have to do. That's the second. The third thing that it does is it supports members in marketing initiatives that would be very difficult for agency owners to do on their own. So for example, like, we do something called database reactivation for certain members, which is basically just, we help them awaken leads that are sleeping in their database. But I have the exact system for how to do that, because we do that at my firm. So we bring that to the table as well for members that it would benefit. So it's really this trifecta of peer network, advisory from people that have done it, and marketing lead gen support. And you can't really scale properly without those 3 essential components. And that's what it offers to its members.
Aaron, so much more to talk about, but We'll save it for another day. I really appreciate it. Everyone, check out joinagencyalliance.com, more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Aaron, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.